Over the past 13 years, I've bought and sold hundreds of houses. I've acquired a substantial rental portfolio of both commercial and residential properties, and I've even built an apartment complex. But none of this would have happened if I hadn't read this one book. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul Rush. I'm a full-time real estate investor and I own a property management business. The goal of my channel is to show you what the real life day-to-day is for a property manager and a real estate investor. Okay, so what was it? What book was it that changed my life? That book was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. A friend of mine recommended that I read this book, and I'm so glad that I did. It's a fun book that has some great stories about Robert Kiyosaki when he grew up as a kid. He says that he had two dads when he grew up, a rich dad and a poor dad. His rich dad was actually his friend's dad, who was a very successful business owner, and his poor dad was actually his dad, who was highly educated but was never financially successful. In his book, Robert shares some fun stories about him growing up as a kid and what he learned from each dad. So I want to share with y'all three big takeaways that I have from this book. The first lesson that I learned from this book is that traditional schooling teaches you to learn a subject, specialize in it, and then go and work for somebody else. That actually specializing in a trade or skill limits your upward potential. You then rely on somebody else for a job. I also learned from the book that the grades you make in school don't determine your success in the future. That was great for me to hear because I didn't always make good grades. The second lesson that I learned from this book is that the rich don't work for money, they have money work for them. And so the example that Robert gives is the poor and middle class get paid for the time that they clock in and clock out. Their income is dependent upon the hours that they work. The rich are different. They do not get paid for the hours they work. They can get paid without having to clock in and clock out. This concept was fantastic for me because I didn't want to get the traditional job when I finished school. I wanted to do something different. So how do you do that? Well, Robert points out that the rich have assets that pay them money instead of their time paying them for money. Which actually brings me to the third lesson that I learned from this book, and that is the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. This was a very simple but great way to explain it. So the book points out that a rental house could be an asset because every month there's a tenant there that will pay you money. On the other side, a car with a car payment is a liability because that takes money out of your pocket every month. Again, a very simple way to look at it, but it opened my eyes to something I hadn't realized. Robert points out that a lot of people don't really realize the difference between that. Some people think that their car is an asset when really it's a liability. This book and those 3 points changed my life. Ultimately, it's what led me down the path that I'm on now of owning real estate and a property management business. I don't consider myself rich, but I am proud to say that I own a lot of assets and I don't have to trade my time for money. If you haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I highly recommend that you go read it. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.